This is a house in Titusville, Florida that many of you may recognize because it's on 2 YouTube videos as being abandoned. And it is my family's homestead that I want to show you original pictures. This is known as the Corral House, but my name is Kathy Whitaker, and I want to show you how it looked when it was in my family. The house was built in 1929, and this is probably circa 1930s. Notice the old car in the carport. This rock wall was made of coquina. This is one of the gates. It had dogs and rabbits on top. And it was later torn down because the railroad said it was too close. This is a picture next door of the original Brevard Lumber Company, which is now down the street. I can remember my father and uncle tearing it down by hand, and I believe they used that lumber to build our horse stables that we had in the backyard. This is how it looked when I lived there around 1972. Here are some pictures from 1970, and this is how I remember the house. The rock wall was made of coquina and built by my grandfather. One side of the house. I think the house was beautiful even though it needed repairing when I lived there. This is the fireplace, which was also made of coquina. And when the Corrals bought it, she didn't like how it looked and painted it all white. The stars represent my grandmother and grandfather, and their children are the other stars. This is my Aunt Jeanette, Uncle O.B., and my cousin Jay. This is the house, I think, in probably late 60s, before we moved in. This is after the Corrals bought it in 71, and they had refreshened it already, but not added the addition yet. And this is my grandfather that built the house, Calvin Henry Whitaker. He worked on the railroad. And this picture is taken downtown Titusville at the train depot. They used to live in one of the houses down there. And my grandmother, Nancy Almina Whitaker, who died not long after the house was built. This is my father, Calvin Howard Whitaker, and his mother. My father in his Navy uniform, mid-40s. And some of you may recognize the building in the background. I'm not sure what it is, but Titusville residents might. This is my father and his 3 sisters at the railroad house. The whole family. I love this picture. This is my grandfather's prized flower garden in the front. And notice the rock walls aren't even finished yet, so that must be early 40s. The family on the back porch. My grandfather to the far right. My father next to him. My father and his 3 sisters in the mid-90s. They've all since passed away. And this is my father taking out a mason jar that my grandfather put in one of the front pillars when it was built. It contains a newspaper from 1930, which I still have in my possession. This is my cousin Jay and I. We made a trip in 2011 to look at the house, and it had been abandoned for a couple of years by then already. And this is what we saw of it. This is the garage and porch enclosure they did on the back. This is the original shed that was there when I lived there. They happened to keep it there, surprisingly. And when we were vacationing, my husband happened to see on one of the inner walls the original writing where my grandfather had ordered the lumber for this building. This is a pamphlet from 2010 from the Historical Commission that can be downloaded. You can find it online. It contains an article that Mary Carell wrote about remodeling and buying the house, and it's pretty interesting. Has a couple of pictures. My name is Kathy Miller, and thank you to anyone who sees this video.